to understand what we're emphasizing. And next week's class, that's exactly according to the schedule. Uh, PowerPoint slides and the lecture file for 2 chapters already. Chapter 8, chapter 10 uploaded under the online. PowerPoint slides are also uploaded. So for those 2 chapters, chapters 8 and 10, listen to the file along with the PowerPoint slides on your own. Of course, if you have any questions or if, please let me know. So actually next week, it's not next week. Next week is another holiday. That is why we are having this lecture file, not a real-time online class, but materials are uploaded. So next week we are not meeting. It's national holiday because it's the day for local election. So semester we strange schedule because we had 3 Wednesdays. Anyway, so the week after next week, our last class meeting, chapters 13 and 14, and then okay. Someone just let me know. You couldn't hear me, right? You couldn't hear me.
Your voice kept cutting off and on. I repeated that.
Ah, sorry about that. Is it okay now? Is
Yes,
it
it's
clear?
much. Yes, it's much better
Yeah,
now. Can you like
I hope
repeat
so.
the? Can you repeat what you
Okay,
were saying?
I will repeat because it's important.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you for letting me know. um, okay, what I was talking about was the schedule. Nothing is new, but I just wanted to recap the way we have been running the course and what's left. Okay, so today we have 2 chapters, chapters 11 and 12. As many of you have already looked up the PowerPoint slides for today's class, chapters 11 and 12. And I will be spending more time on chapter 11 than 12. What is important for your preparation for the final is focusing more upon the parts that are covered in class. Okay, so I will pick the subtopics which I think are more important and are more relevant to the whole sequence of topics in this semester's course. And 2 weeks after today, we have our last class meeting. And we have 2 chapters again, which are chapters 13 and 14. That's exactly according to the schedule. We have 2 chapters, chapter 8 and 10, for which I have uploaded the lecture file and the PowerPoint slides. And you basically study on your own using the lecture file and the PowerPoint slides. And if you have any question, you need to let me know. And our final exam will be exactly according to the schedule. I believe it's June 8th. I mean 15th. Let me look it up again. Does anyone know exactly when? I'm a little mixed up because of the 15. Yes, it's 15 at 3 o'clock. And the same format, but I haven't decided exactly how many minutes you will have. But for most of the students, you will have sufficient time. And Do you have any question regarding the test? And again, you are required to turn on your cameras, logged on to your WebEx while taking the final exam on eClass site. Okay? If you don't have any question, now let me check the attendance. Okay, it's here.
Professor?
Yes.
So our final exam, the contents of the exam will be like starting from what we learned after the midterm until the very end.
That's right. From chapter 7 through chapter 14.
Okay, thank
14.
you.
Yes, sure.
So, Professor,
Yes.
as the type of the question is all multiple question as previous test?
Yes. Yes. Multiple choice, which means you have multiple choices and you pick one answer, one correct answer. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we have 5 students who haven't checked in with the QR code. Sarah Adonisio. Sarah Adonisio. Chin Kenneth Kien Ho. Kenneth. Rosales Gozar Jade Lissandra. Lorena Rodriguez Cuevas Rodriguez. Miju Jo Miju. All right. I get that no one's here among these 5
Professor?
students. Yes.
I had a class with Sarah. Maybe she got confused because our Korean class is over. I will try to reach her, so maybe she can
Okay.
join later on.
When she enters this classroom, Sarah can leave a message on the chatting
Okay.
board so that I would know that she's here. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let me stop sharing this. Okay, and now I will share the PowerPoint slides. Okay. I try not to make any mistakes in terms of using this audio visual, equipment, but sometimes I forget to put on the microphone. And that happened today. Sorry about that. And you need to let me know as soon as you have any problem. You can just leave a comment on the chatting board, then I would know. Okay. Right. We have 2 chapters. Chapter 11 is about myth, legends, and folk tales. And chapter 12 is about artistic dimension. Okay, chapter 11 first. Myth, legends, and folk tales. These are all, old stories, different names for old stories. They are not the same. they have important differences among them, and I will explain what they are. These old stories are something that anthropologists try to gather as very important sources of information on the culture. When we go out to our field, we talk to people, and for these old stories, we especially talk to the senior members of the community, and these old stories contain very important information, pieces of information that we need to acquire for our understanding of the culture and society. So let's first look at the learning objectives in this chapter. The first thing is to understand the theoretical perspective used to analyze myth. So, okay, these are old stories, but how do we analyze and interpret these stories, and what do they tell us? Distinguish between myth, legends, and folk tales. These old stories are different in important regard, so we will learn to distinguish these. Explore how myth, legends, and folk tales relate to other aspects of culture. Okay, we are not just learning these old stories per se. Actually, we are learning about these old stories because they are closely interrelated with other aspects of culture, and we are interested to understand these culture as a whole. So how these stories are related to other aspects of culture, it's another learning objective. Provide examples of how traditional forms of storytelling adapt to change and to new forms of communications technologies. Okay. Now, these stories are the basis for new cultural industry, which is benefiting from new developments and innovations in the communication technology. This serves as the basis for popular movies, dramas, and animation. So we will learn about this aspect, utilizing these stories in modern contemporary times. Document how traditional myth, legends, and folk tales in contemporary America or contemporary Korea and elsewhere are utilized in popular culture and new media. Okay, so old stories in contemporary context. So these are the learning objectives that we will have in mind while we discuss today's topic. Okay, let's start with the definitions of myth, legends, and folk tales, different kinds of old stories. We know what these are, but in our everyday conversation, we do not clearly distinguish these stories, names of these stories. First, we start with myth. In Korean, 신화, right? Myth deal with the remote past. So 신화 is about remote past. Often with the time of the origin of things, when everything started or when everything was created by God, for example, both natural and cultural. So origin of things, natural things, cultural, how the world and its people were created, etc. Creation myth is one of the typical myth. Myths are associated with the sacred because, when everything was created, that was by the hand of God or some kind of deity, some kind of supernatural force. Creation myth. Well, in Christianity, we have Old Testament, and in the chapter Genesis, It talks about how everything was created and who's the children of whom, you know. So very early part of human history. In Korea, we have a creation myth called Dangun myth. Dangun is believed to be, according to this myth, believed to be the founder of Gojoseon, which is also supposed to be the oldest dynasty in Korean history. But we're talking about myth and mythic period. We are not talking about history. Okay, the story of Dangun was written down as part of history much later. So people are not interested, or people do not talk about the historical factual ground for myth. Myth is significant when people talk about it, when people want to believe it. But historical truth is not very relevant to myth. So it's about old past, and it often talks about the origin of things, the nature, and culture. So myth is a sacred story because it often involves gods and goddesses. And we know many myths, foundation myth of countries, dynasties, or simply human beings. Okay. Legends in Korean 전설, sometimes are thought to have a basis in historical fact because it may involve some historical figures who actually lived during certain historical period. And then people add interesting garnishes, interesting exaggeration. So it becomes legends. So legends are not historical fact either, but it may involve some historical figures or historical reference. So some people would say, oh, this is actually what happened. But legends, by definition, are different from historical facts. King Arthur, George Washington, who actually lived during certain period, but there are interesting legends involving King Arthur or George Washington. George Washington, as all of you know very well, was the first president of the United States of America. And for Americans, especially, he is a very significant figure. And George Washington also fought in the Independence War. And he was one of the founders. So he is one of the figures, one of the main figures in the story of independence and founding of the United States of America. Well, that's historical fact. But then people love to talk about the extraordinary aspect of George Washington. And now the legends begin. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard of an anecdote of cherry tree about little George Washington. When he was a child, a boy, there was a very well-known story about cherry tree and George Washington's honesty as a boy. George Washington's father was a plantation owner, as I heard, and they had a big plantation, had beautiful garden. So he was from a fairly affluent background. And a friend of his father gave George, little little boy George a machete, small axe, which is used to cut things, as a gift. And I'm sure that by today's standards, that's not a really good gift for a little boy. But anyway, George wanted to know whether the machete worked well. So he went out and he used it on his father's favorite cherry tree in the garden. And it worked pretty well. So the cherry tree fell down to the ground. Well, when his father returned, uh, returned home, he was very angry. He was shocked and angry, and he was trying to look for who cut down the cherry tree that he loved. And then little George appeared in front of his father, and he said, "Father, father, I cannot say a lie. I cannot tell you a lie. I did it. I wanted to see if this machete worked." So that's the story, actually. And the lesson of the story is the importance of honesty. Someone who was honest enough to confess one's wrongdoing as a little boy grew up to be a great leader of the country who was one of the founders of the country and became the first president. So this is a legend. Later, historians of American history couldn't find any evidence that there was a cherry tree and it really fell down by the machete used by little George Washington. It's a very nice story. And grandmothers, for example, would tell this legend to their grandchildren and would add the lesson of the story. So it's so important to be honest, and those honest people become, respectable people like George Washington. He also has an interesting story of throwing a silver coin across the Potomac River. That's another myth, legend about George Washington. George Washington was very physically strong, even as a boy. He threw a silver dollar coin, which is quite heavy, across the Potomac River, which is, in fact, impossible. Because this part of Potomac River is near the ocean and it's very, very wide. A boy cannot throw a silver dollar coin across the river. But this story is another story that people love to talk about because it tells how special, how extraordinary the leader was, and even as a boy. So, okay, legends are based on some historical fact, but people elaborate, people exaggerate, people add something else to make them legends. Okay. In our textbook, there's also a notion of urban legends. Urban legends are particular kinds of legends. They are stories about contemporary events purporting to be factual. Well, it is supposed to be true, but they are not. That circulate widely and with variation. Reported as a true individual experience, which has an element of belief and a warning or a moral. We have good example, 도시전설 in Korean. I think we have direct translation, and we often talk about 도시전설. When there are some, threats or crisis in the society, urban legends are born. It's supposed to be true, but they're not. They're not. People fabricate stories, but it's so believable because people are concerned about certain issues, like stories about epidemic, for example, when there was Ebola virus or HIV. There were rumors of, how many people got infected in this way or that way. A particular group of people are supposed to be spreading the virus. All these stories which are not based on facts. Ethnic prejudice are often prevalent in urban legends. Financial fraud, for example, you may have received a certain message on Kakao Talk or a text message that says, when there is a call from this number, you should not call back. Some of them may have some link to the fact, but some of them are baseless. Banking scam, food safety, food poisoning. There are rumors that are spread quite quickly because people are concerned. These are called urban legends, 도시 전설. The last one of the three old stories, folk tales, 민담, folk tales, they deal with an indeterminate time. They don't have particular reference to history. Usually starts with once upon a time. That sounds very familiar, right? Once upon a time, there were a rabbit and a tortoise, right? These are very well-known folktale. There are, other folktales like about a fox or a crane. And these stories usually have lessons in the story. Good deeds are rewarded. Wrong deeds, bad deeds are punished. Honesty is important. Originally, myth, legends, and folk tales were transmitted orally. It's like a bedtime story from parents or grandparents, or this is performed in public. Storytelling was a great form of entertainment before TV, before games, and before internet. When there was a sort of a big market, storytellers would appear, and they were very popular figures as an entertainer. And each telling was a performance. So the storyteller, a professional, would tell the story again and again, but differently, with different audience, just reflecting the audience reaction. So they would interact with the audience. In Korean, a good example is 마당극 or storytelling or 판소리. These are all kinds of storytelling. Now, why are these important, especially myth? Story about remote past, often about the creation or origin of things. Why? And why do anthropologists study myth? What does myth tell us? Many anthropologists have studied myth in the society they worked. One of such anthropologists, Malinowski, I hope you still remember this name because I have been talking about Malinowski's fieldwork methodology and other work such as economic exchange, marriage exchange on Trobriand Island many times actually. So Malinowski is the name of anthropologists that I've been talking about quite a few times. He said that myth is a charter for how people should believe, act, and feel. So myth contains the kind of charter that how people should think and believe and do. That's why anthropologists love to know the myth, because you would like to understand why and how the people believe, act, and feel. It's a charter. That's what Malinowski said. And later on, we will have interesting case, and this one is from Japan, where we can see that the myth is a charter for people, in this case, the Japanese people. So we'll have a concrete case for this. Another anthropologist named Clark Hahn emphasized the interdependence of myth and ritual. Okay, myths are the stories and rituals are what people do, and rituals are based on myth. Okay, there is a story of gods and goddesses, and they have this ritual worshiping those deities and do something as part of the ritual because of what's emphasized in the myth. On the other hand, by doing ritual, by practicing those rituals, myths are reinforced because you have this ritual regularly, you make the myth even stronger, even more meaningful for the people and the society. So that is what is meant by interdependence of myth and ritual. We have numerous examples of the interdependence of myth and ritual. And one of such cases is myth and ritual of Danoje Festival in Gangneung, Korea. And we have 3-minute video on this shortly. Another anthropologist, Claude Lévi-Strauss, whose name was mentioned when I was talking about structural anthropology in France, so French structuralism, and he emphasized the underneath structure in culture, and through analyzing myth, we can decipher the underlying structure of meanings in a culture. Lévi-Strauss, for Lévi-Strauss, it was important to understand myth in the society that he worked. He said myths provide explanations for contradictions that are present in a culture and that cannot be resolved. You know, there are problems and contradictions that we cannot really understand or accept. Then usually there are myths regarding those contradictions in the society, something we cannot accept or understand. Oh, it's because long time ago, this and this happened, and that has been transmitted through history. That's why we still have this issue. And that's why we still have to respect this, or we still have this hierarchy between this group and that group, because this happened long time ago, according to the myth. Okay, so that's what Lévi-Strauss said, explanations for contradictions. Okay, let's look at the first example, which is Gangneung Danoje Festival. This is oldest festival in Korea. People say that it has more than 1,000 years of history. We have some historical evidence, but we still lack some information on the continuity of the festival throughout the 1,000-year period. I don't know, but this is a very popular and very significant festival, local festival in the east coast of Korean Peninsula, in the city of Gangneung, not just within the city, but around the city of Gangneung. Gangneung city is on the eastern coastal region in Gangwon province. and it has a population of about 200,000. It's one of the major cities on the eastern coast. And Gangneung Danoje Festival was inscribed on the UNESCO's heritage list in 2008. But 3 years earlier, in 2005, it was selected as the masterpiece of intangible heritage. So it's one of the major intangible cultural heritages in Korea. And this one shows, this is a really good example of the interdependence between the myth and ritual. There is a beautiful myth, and there's beautiful ritual and festival. It's done annually, and it falls on the day of Tano, which is 5th of May, according to lunar calendar, and the day of Tano that originated in China. And this became an issue when Korea nominated Gangneung Danoje Festival to UNESCO. Some Chinese people were not very happy because Danoje or Dano is Chinese. How Koreans can nominate it to UNESCO? It's Chinese, not Koreans. However, that is not exactly what UNESCO heritage list means, especially for intangible cultural heritage. Every local festival is special. So if there is a good Tano festival in Vietnam, Vietnam can nominate their Tano festival because of cultural differences and cultural diversity in all different countries or localities. Danoje Festival would be different. That's the spirit of UNESCO listing system. So yes, the date originated from Dano. Oh, there is a typo in the title. Gangneung Danoje, Danoje. That should be written Dan. So this is based on a local myth in this region. And it's held annually, takes place in the town of Gangneung and its surroundings. And Gangneung is, the surroundings areas include the Taebaek mountain range. When you go to the eastern coastal area of Korea, you have to go over this mountain range. You will go through many tunnels and you will go up high on the highway. And the myth includes the stories of deities residing in the Taebaek mountain range. The festival, Gangneung Danoje Festival, includes a shamanistic ritual on the Daegwallyeong Ridge, which is high on the mountain, which pays tribute to the mountain deity and male and female tutelary deities. So there are 3 deities in this myth. And the male deity actually was a tiger who was living in the mountain range. And according to many myths in Korea, those animals, some animals with special, special capacity can can transform into humans. And this tiger, a male tiger, obviously, was he fell in love with a girl, a human girl, living in Gangneung City, and he was deeply in love. So he, in the form of tiger, he abducted the girl into the mountains. So basically, the tiger took the girl and took her into the mountains, and they got married. They became male and female tutelary deities, and they are still worshipped. Now, let's think about this. By today's standards, today's cultural standards, I don't think it's a beautiful story. The abduction of girl against her wishes, right? Whether it's by a tiger or man, changed into tiger, because myths are all really old stories. Sometimes it clashes with today's ethical standards or other standards. So I think this is such an example where, abduction of a girl by a tiger or a person who became a tiger, it's not a acceptable story. Oftentimes we find this clash between old stories and contemporary standards. We not only in Korean myth, but in the myth of many different cultures and societies, we do have such examples. I will talk about another example, such example from another country. Anyway, nowadays, Gangneung Danoje Festival includes concerts. It has shamanistic rituals. It also has Confucian rituals and Buddhist rituals. It has sports games, competitions, plays, many different things. It's a comprehensive festival. I'm sure that some of you have been there. If you have a chance, I strongly recommend that you visit Gangneung City, and participate in this festival, because the local people are really enthusiastic about, having this festival and continuing this tradition. One of the specific particular features of the festival is the coexistence of Confucian, shamanistic, and Buddhist rituals. It's very interesting case where these three different traditions coexist and actually collaborate in making these rituals and festivals. The rituals are held separately, but they are all part of the whole festival. Through the rituals devoted to the deities, the region is believed to remain unaffected by natural disasters because they pray for the peace and prosperity and safety, allowing all its residents to live in peace and prosperity. So that's one of the important aspect of the festival. And people visit this festival site. People also have a really big outdoor market. And up until about a few decades ago, 1/3 of all economic transactions were done on this outdoor market, which continues for nearly a month. So it's a really big thing. So this festival is not only about myth and ritual, but many other aspects: economic exchange, economic markets, and it also shows the local politics, because the leaders in the festival and the rituals are actually political leaders in the region. So you can see the relationship between myth and other aspects of the culture as well. Okay, let us continue. Let me talk about. Okay, let me first talk about the relevant issues in Gangneung Danoje Festival. Like Clockon said, the interdependence between myth and ritual is very clear in this case. And according to the classification of rite or rituals in chapter 10, which is the previous chapter, a rite of intensification, not a rite of passage. There are two different kinds of rites. This one Gangneung Danoje Festival is a very good example of a rite of intensification for the community. Through these rituals and festivals, they pray for the prosperity of the community, and people voluntarily participate and donate rice, as you will see in the video. So people actively participate, and people know that this kind of festival is a rite of intensification which will boost the solidarity among the members of the community. And this case also shows the myth, ritual, and other aspects of culture, economy, politics, kinship, etc. So it's sort of the relevance of myth in the culture and the society. Okay, let me introduce another example. This one is from Japan. And this is a Raiho Shin, right? In Japanese pronunciation, Raiho Shin, and Nebang Shin in Korean pronunciation of the Chinese characters. Basically, these are visiting deities, visiting gods and goddesses, ritual visits of deities in masks and costumes. And this is also UNESCO heritage. You will see in the video that these visiting deities who are actually villagers, the villagers who are wearing these scary masks and costumes, they visit each household in the village, and they teach the young children in the house, and they command good deeds, and they also scold bad deeds committed by the children through the year. So this kind of visiting rituals are held at particular time of the year, at the beginning of the year, and it's also a very important occasion for the villagers come together to have this kind of ritual and to remind the youngsters and the village adults about the importance of morals and ethics in the society. So Raihoshin rituals take place annually in various regions of Japan. It's scattered, as you will see on the map in the video, different parts of Japan, on days that mark the beginning of the year or when the seasons change. Such rituals stem from folk beliefs, myth, that deities from the outer world, and these deities are called Nebangshin or Raihoshin, visit communities and usher in the new year or new season with happiness and good luck. During the rituals, as you will see in the video, local people dressed as deities in outlandish costumes and frightening masks visit houses admonishing laziness or teaching children good behavior. And in the video, you will see that the children are really scared because they look scary, and they admonish these children on their bad deeds, and they teach lessons, and they look too scared actually. And this is another case which I would like to discuss, about the clash between old ritual behaviors and modern standards. Is it the right thing to make the children get so scared of these supernatural beings, and they are frightened? So by today's standards, contemporary parents wouldn't do it actually, but this has been transmitted through history. The head of the household treats the deities to a special meal to conclude the visit. And this is very common throughout the world, where these, people dressed up as supernatural deities visit the households, spiritually and symbolically cleanse the house of any bad influence, and then the household, the families would give good food to the visitors. This is not just a way of treating human beings with good meal. Actually, symbolically, the household, the families are treating the supernatural deities, the deities and spirits with good food. So it's in a way, it crosses the boundary between human world and God's world. So special meal to conclude the visit, and in some communities, the rituals take place in the streets. In some communities, men of a certain age become the Raihoshin, while in others, women play such roles. Because the rituals have developed in regions with different social and historical contexts, they take diverse forms, reflecting different regional characteristics. And by performing the rituals, local people, notably children, have their identities molded as member of community, develop a sense of affiliation to the community, and strengthen ties among themselves. Well, these are the positive aspect. In accordance with their ancestors' teachings, community members share responsibilities and cooperate in preparing and performing the ritual, acting as the practitioners responsible for transmitting the related knowledge. Let's look at a photo. They look scary, right? And the boy, poor boy, little boy, I think in his mother's arms, he's crying because he is too scared. Is this good? That may have different opinion to this. So related issues, myth and ritual, the interdependent, the story of this Raihoshin and what they do as part of these rituals. Myth as a charter for how people should believe, act, and feel, as Malinowski said. Because these Raihoshin would talk about what should be done, what's the moral thing, ethical thing to do, and what the children should learn and how they have to behave. And this is a perfect case of rite of intensification, and that is relevant to the contents of chapter 10. Enculturation of the children. Actually, this is a part of enculturation. They learn the norms and values of the society. That's very important part of enculturation. Okay, so these are the two cases where myth and ritual are interrelated, and many other aspects about myth. Let me copy the links of these two videos, one for 3 minutes, the other for 10 minutes. We'll watch them back to back, and we will take our first break as well. Okay, this is the first one. This is the second one.